Hi, I hope everyone's doing well and you're ready for today's lesson. Before we get started, make sure you check your homework on page 12 with the posted answer keys. Today's lesson is going to be on solving quadratic linear systems algebraically again. Open your packet to page 13 to get started. We're going to be starting with question number 7. Now, the difference between these equations and the ones from yesterday is that both of the equations are not set equal to y. So the first thing you want to do is to set both equations equal to y. To do that, take your second equation and add x to both sides, giving you y equals x plus 5. Now that both equations are in the form y equals, get the solutions from your calculator first and write them down. The solutions from your calculator should be 0, 5, and 3, 8. Now, to solve this algebraically, since both equations are now in the form y equals, if both equations are set equal to y, now you can take and set them equal to each other. So your equation will be 2x squared minus 5x plus 5 equals x plus 5. 2x squared minus 5x plus 5 equals x plus 5. Since this is a quadratic, meaning there's an x squared, the next thing you want to do is to set your equation equal to 0. To do that, subtract x from both sides, giving you 2x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 5. Subtract 5 from both sides to get 2x squared minus 6x, and 5 minus 5 would be 0, so you just get 2x squared minus 6x equals 0. To solve for x, you can either factor or do the quadratic formula. This type of factoring would be greatest common factor. The greatest common factor for this would be 2x. So if you take and divide out a 2x, you'll end up with 2x parentheses x minus 3 equals 0. You make a t-chart, 2x equals 0, divide by 2, x equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, add 3, and x equals 3. These x values should match up with your solutions from the calculator, x equals 0 and x equals 3. Remember, you're not done yet because you still must find the y values. To do that, take one of your equations. I'm going to use y equals x plus 5. Substitute in for x, so y equals 0 plus 5 and y equals 5, giving me a solution of 0, 5. And for my second solution, y equals x plus 5, substitute in for x, 3 plus 5, y is equal to 8, giving me a solution of 3, 8. The solutions that you get should be the same as the solutions that you got from your calculator in the beginning of the question. If they're not the same, it means you made a mistake somewhere, so go back and fix it. If you would prefer to use the quadratic formula to solve for x, keep in mind your a value would be 2, your b value would be negative 6, and your c value would be 0. When you do the quadratic formula, you will still get an answer of x equals 0 and x equals 3, and then you will have to sub in to get your y values. You may want to pause the video to get all of these notes down for question number 7, page 13 in your packet. Once you copy this down, we will go on to the next question, which will be question number 8. Now, question number 8, again, the very first step is to make sure that both equations are in the form y equals. The first equation is in the correct form of y equals, but the second equation is not. So to get the y by itself, you would need to add 5 to both sides, giving you y equals 2x plus 5. Now that both equations are in the form y equals, you can now take and set them equal to each other. X squared plus 2x minus 4 equals 2x plus 5. Since you have an x squared, you're going to want to take and set your equation equal to 0 by subtracting 2x from both sides. 2x minus 2x cancels out, so x squared minus 4 equals 5, minus the 5 from both sides, so x squared minus 9 equals 0. Again, to solve, you can either factor or use the quadratic formula. To factor, x squared minus 9 equals 0, we would be using dots because it is difference of two squares. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 9 is 3, giving me x plus 3, x minus 3 equals 0. Make a t-chart and solve. X plus 3 equals 0, minus 3 from both sides. X equals negative 3. X minus 3 equals 0. Add the 3. X equals positive 3. Remember, we're not done yet until we find our y value. Write down one of the two equations. I'm going to use y equals 2x plus 5 and substitute in for x. Y equals 2 times negative 3 plus 5, giving you y equals negative 1, and y equals 2x plus 5, so y equals 2 times 3 plus 5, giving me y equals 11. You can use either the original equation or the one that you solved for y. My solutions turn out to be negative 3, negative 1, and 3, 11. Now, what did I forget to do in the beginning of the question? I forgot to get the solutions from the calculator. The reason getting the solutions from the calculator is so important is that it's a good way to check whether or not you did this correctly. So in your calculator, you should be typing in y1 equals x squared plus 2x minus 4, y2 equals 2x plus 2, second, trace, intersect. When you get the solutions from your calculator, the solutions turned out to be 3, 11, and negative 3, negative 1. Both of those solutions match my algebraic solutions, therefore you know that you did this one correct. Again, make sure you always find both the x and the y value. Otherwise, you will only be getting half credit. Take and turn to the next page. On the next page, look down at question number 11. Question number 11, the first thing you're going to have to do is solve the equation for y. Solve for y. After you solve the second equation for y, then you're going to get the solutions from the calculator, and then you will solve it algebraically by setting the equations equal to each other. Question number 12, both of the equations are already in the form of y equals, so you could start by getting the answers from your calculator first. You will be doing these two questions as part of your homework tonight. Turn to page 15. On page 15, the directions say, state all values of x for which f of x equals g of x. For these questions, it means you only need to solve for x. Only solve for x. So you do not need to plug back in and solve for y. F of x equals g of x means to set the equations equal to each other. Now, technically, these should be in the form of f of x and g of x, but they do both say y equals instead. But for question number 13, you will take and do x squared minus 4x minus 2 equals x minus 2. Since you have an x squared, you're going to set the quadratic equal to 0. So minus x from both sides, x squared minus 5x minus 2 equals negative 2. Add 2 to both sides, giving you x squared minus 5x equals 0. Again, to solve, you can either factor or do the quadratic formula. In this case, I'm going to factor using greatest common factor, which is x. I'm going to divide out an x and get x parentheses x minus 5 equals 0. Make a t-chart and solve. X equals 0. X minus 5 equals 0. So add 5 to both sides, and x equals 5. Now again, I forgot to do the very first step of getting the solutions on the calculator first. So everybody now go to your calculator and type in y equals x squared minus 4x minus 2 and y equals x minus 2. Second, trace, intersect, and you're going to get a solution, or two solutions, solutions of 0, negative 2, and 5, 3. Since the question is only asking you for your x values, make sure that your x's match up. X equals 5 and x equals 0. Both of these are correct. Again, you do not need to find the y value because the directions specifically say to solve for x. Let's take and do one more question together. Turn to